Let me tell you a story. Not just any story, but one that might linger in the corners of your mind long after the lights go out. It's about a child, one you might have passed by without a second glance. A child who walked alone, unseen, unheard, and forgotten. Picture this: empty streets, heavy shadows stretching across cracked sidewalks, and a young boy trudging home from school. No one waits for him at the door. No one calls his name. His footsteps echo in hollow hallways, accompanied only by the laughter of other children in the distance, laughter that he knows isn't meant for him. Every day is the same. No hand to hold, no voice to guide. Just him and the growing silence. But sometimes, silence can be deceptive, can't it? Because in that quiet, something began to stir, something dark, something that whispered to him when no one else would. What happens to a child like that, pushed aside and forgotten? What grows in the shadows of loneliness and pain? Stay with me, because this story doesn't end the way you think it will. In fact, it might not have an ending at all. They say school is where you learn the most important lessons in life. But for him, it was a battlefield. Imagine this: a small boy walking through crowded hallways, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting to avoid the gazes of his classmates. But the gazes found him anyway. Every laugh, every sneer was a dagger. They pointed, whispered, and then shouted. The words didn't just sting, they lodged deep, becoming part of him. And it wasn't just the kids. The teachers, the ones who were supposed to protect him, turned away. Some even joined in, their smiles cold, their eyes full of silent judgment. They were his peers and mentors, yet they became his tormentors, chipping away at his fragile mind. It wasn't just bullying, it was isolation, a slow erosion of his identity. He started to believe what they said about him, that he was different, that he didn't belong. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every cruel word, every mocking laugh was feeding something inside him. At first it was small, a flicker, a flash of anger quickly buried. But anger doesn't die, it waits, it grows. He'd sit alone in his room, fists clenched, his tiny face twisted in frustration. Time passed, and so did the years, but the anger stayed. With every scornful laugh, every dismissive glance, the ember in his heart grew, fueled by pain, ignited by hatred. And then one night, everything changed. The silence he'd grown used to was broken, not by laughter, not by ridicule, but by a voice. It was faint at first, a whisper that barely tickled his ear. But as he sat there in the dark, it grew louder, sharper, impossible to ignore. One day, a voice rose from the shadows, dark and commanding. It was a friend, a mentor, whispering promises of retribution. It told him he wasn't weak, he wasn't small, he was powerful, more powerful than they could ever imagine, and all he had to do was listen. At first he resisted, who wouldn't? But the voice was patient and persuasive, and soon it wasn't just a voice, it was a presence, a guide shaping him, filling the emptiness inside. The voice became his guide, his friend, his very identity. The child faded, replaced by something darker, more powerful. As the years went by, the changes were impossible to ignore. His reflection in the mirror grew foreign, unfamiliar. His eyes darkened, his skin paled. He stopped feeling fear, or sadness, or joy. What replaced those feelings was something primal, something otherworldly. His body became a vessel, his mind a playground for something unholy. His flesh twisted to match his spirit, his mind engulfed by darkness. He was no longer a boy, but something demonic driven by vengeance. And then, he acted. He didn't just seek revenge, he became revenge. One by one, he hunted them down. The classmates who mocked him, the teachers who turned away. He didn't care if they recognized him. It wasn't about recognition, it was about fear. And when they saw him, they felt it. They'd stolen his innocence, left him hollow, and now he was back to reclaim the pieces, each scream, each tear, a tribute to his pain. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Because vengeance wasn't a goal, it was his purpose, his reason for existing. And with every act, The thing inside him grew stronger, darker. This wasn't the end of his story. No, it was just the beginning. And so, the boy who once walked alone has become something else entirely. No longer a victim, no longer human. Now he is both a victim and monster, an eternal force of rage. From child to demon, he lives for revenge, and his hunger will never be satisfied. The torment that shaped him now fuels him, an endless cycle of pain and vengeance that will never be broken. Somewhere, out there in the dark, he waits, not for forgiveness, not for redemption, but for his next victim. And the scariest part? It could be anyone. Maybe even you. What do you think truly creates a monster? Is it the world around them? Or is it something waiting, deep inside, ready to take over? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a moment where the darkness felt just a little too close? Share your own stories. I'd love to hear them. If this story left you with chills, there are plenty more where that came from. Be sure to subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next terrifying tale. Because here in the shadows, the stories never really end. They're just waiting to be told.